The Widow of Hill's Crest, written by Leon One the Lion and Jefocles, narrated by Adam Cunliffe. The raging storm showed no sign of letting up as Marcus Stone arrived into town. Hill's Crest was not unfamiliar to him. The unrelenting downpour of rain washed over the already saturated dirt. Walking through the sticky mud was something he was used to. The fact that the town didn't seem to care enough to pave the old path from the depot really wasn't a problem for him, as he found enjoyment in the rush of memories from past visits. The wind was harsh on his face. Heavy droplets stung his pale skin. Marcus ducked his head and pushed on, squinting to see through the sheets of rain undulating in the soft lamplight cast from the row of houses just ahead. Suddenly, through the noise, he heard a voice calling to him. "Excuse me, stranger. Come over here for a second, would you?" Marcus stopped and pivoted to his right. He could see a figure waving to him from a nearby porch. Happy to see an escape from the storm, he wasted no time and accepted the invitation. "You all right there?" The man was old and sincere. He turned and extended his arm toward the open screen door. "Not many newcomers come around here these days. Why don't you come inside and wait out the storm? It won't be getting any better for a while. It gets awfully bad this time of year." "Thank you for the offer, but I'm here on a job. I'm meeting someone. It has been a while, Mr. Franklin." Old man Franklin was caught off guard. He squinted and leaned in to get a better look at Marcus. Suddenly, it hit him. His eyes opened wide, and his expression warmed enough to make both men smile. "Oh, Marcus Stone. It's been such a long time. Nice to see you back in town. I can't let you go that easy. Let me get you something warm to drink." His enthusiasm was enough to make Marcus stay, if only to take a break from the pounding rain. The old man disappeared inside, not minding the screen door, which slowly creaked back until Marcus heard the latch settle into the faceplate with a dull click. Not a moment later, the door swung open, and Franklin pushed through with a pair of steaming mugs. Marcus graciously accepted the offering, cupping it in his hands to overcome the chill. The aroma of the tea was stout and heavy. Marcus quite liked it. Franklin smiled proudly and reached his hand out to officially greet Marcus. "It's so nice having you back in town. Unfortunately, it's for the reason that we all feared." He lowered his head, as if in a silent prayer, before finally blowing and taking a slurp from his mug. As the old man looked up again, Marcus noticed the tears in his eyes. "She used to be such a lovely woman," he said, "both in life and after life. I could always sit in my rocking chair, and when she'd come by, we would talk for hours. As long as you didn't upset her, everything was fine. All of us locals learned firsthand the things that upset her." Franklin paused and sipped his tea before continuing. "It was just the tourists that would set her off, not knowing her like the rest of us. She was downright pleasant company otherwise." He frowned into his mug. "Recently, she has become upset by more and more things. The list of things that set her off seemed to grow as she drifted deeper into depression. You can sometimes see her on stormy nights like this one, out on the docks, calling for her love to come home." After a brief pause, the old man continued. "The storm must remind her of the night his boat sank. Good man he was, Mr. Blackwell. I remember him teaching me how to fish on his boat. One of the first jobs I had. It was such a shame to see him go." Mrs. Blackwell was never the same after that. Of course, none of us could imagine that she would come back as a spirit after she died. Franklin looked over toward Marcus, remembering why he had come back to town. Of course, many exorcists warned us that there was the potential of her falling deeper and deeper into a spiral of depression that could hurt everyone. I think they called it the dark mirror. Something to do with all of your negative traits being reflected back at you with none of the good ones. Widow Blackwell was a beloved part of the community. None of us could bring ourselves to have her exorcised. Marcus set his mug on the railing. "Yes, I was aware, but I couldn't bring myself to do it either. After all, what right did I have to interfere with your lovely little town? Now I must do something before it's too late." I will do everything I can to help her." He takes one last drink, emptying the mug before handing it back to Old Man Franklin. "Thank you so much for the drink. It was good chatting with you. I should get into town to speak with Mr. Kent. Hopefully when we meet again, it will be under better circumstances." The two men shook hands. The smile on Franklin's face shone warmly under the porch light. "Thank you for stopping by. Oh, and you'll probably find the mayor just off the town square." Ducking his head into the hood of his cloak, Marcus descended once again into the squall and made his way toward the center of town. Even with the rain and wind, somehow the town didn't feel hostile or frigid. Maybe that was just the warm tea in his gut, but the town had an odd calm about it. Marcus had very fond memories of Hill's Crest, and it felt good to be back. As the storm raged on, he could see townsfolk making their way from place to place, rushing to find shelter under any available cover. Others seemed content on covered porches, smiling and nodding as he passed. Marcus tipped his head in acknowledgement and kept going. He eventually spotted the lamp post right at the center of town square, perched atop the circular pavilion. Its light illuminated the ornate tiles trimming the domed roof. Without hesitation, Marcus took hold of the iron banister and pulled himself up the steps, careful not to slip on the wet tiles. Now, safe from the downpour, he pulled back his cloak and noticed a man standing alone on the far side of the platform. Taking a guess, he extended his right arm and leaned forward. "Mr. Kent?" It had been a long time since their last meeting. This felt like a gamble. The man nodded in the affirmative. "You must be Marcus Stone, then. Hello," he replied, stepping forward to accept the handshake. Marcus let out a quick sigh of relief before speaking. "I was talking with Mr. Franklin on the way in here. Sounds like he's doing well, as always. He was telling me that the widow's condition has changed quite a bit. She seems more easily provoked. Would you mind filling me in?" "Certainly," Mr. Kent replied, gesturing for Marcus to follow him. The two men walked across to the house at the far corner of the square. "Let's go inside and get you dried off." A fire was already burning in the fireplace. The den's wooden paneling dated back to the days of the first settlers, before the town had a name. Books, a large globe on a floor stand, a telescope, and a bar cart against the wall entering the chamber all spoke of the character and adventure of the people who lived here. The two men talked for hours, going over all of the details of what not to say around Mrs. Blackwell, like mentioning any of her friends that have passed away. This also included mentioning her house. She seemed to get upset over all of the broken down things in her house, but any time somebody tried to fix them, she would go into a rage. After discussing strategy, they decided it would be best to wait until morning to approach her. She was not pleasant to encounter when she was set off, which was most of the time, and certainly dealing with her under such a heavy storm at night would be a disadvantage. Besides, the rest would do Marcus good. The next morning, Marcus was served breakfast by Mr. Kent's wife. The two exchanged pleasantries for a while, and then Mr. Kent smiled and cut to the chase. "Have you come up with a plan? Is there anything that I can get you?" "No, I'll be fine. Thank you. I think that I'd like to try talking to her for a start. Maybe she'll listen to reason and we can make this easier for everyone." Mr. Kent looked doubtful, but agreed. "You'll find her down at the docks. She spends more and more time there. She's starting to scare away some of the sailors. We had to build some new docks on the south side of town just to steer clear of her." Marcus glanced out past the buildings towards the sea. The town sat on enough of a hill that he could see the wooden structures of a dock sticking out from the shore below. And at the edge, he could make out a hazy, pale form. That must be her, he thought to himself. Eager to get to work, Marcus thanked the Kents and made his way downhill toward the docks. His staff imbued him with special power. He clutched it as he walked. Mindful of the purpose of his visit, he would rely on every bit of its strength to help the ghostly widow of Hill's Crest. "Genevieve Blackwell," he called out as he stepped onto the dock. "My name is Marcus. I would like to help. May I speak with you?" From the back, her silhouette was highlighted by the morning sun. A long cloak waved in the sea breeze, revealing a tattered dress and her somewhat translucent form. Genevieve, he repeated, approaching her with calm and an open heart. In less than an instant, her position reversed. She was now facing him. Her tear-stained cheeks seemed to sparkle in the light, reflecting from the sea, bobbing up and down around the dock posts. "Who are you?" she cried out in a rage. The man was unfamiliar to her, but the large cross hanging from his neck was enough to set her off. "Are you another priest coming to exorcise me and convince the townspeople to take me away from my home?" "Of course not." Marcus shone with compassion. "I was simply hoping we might share a moment of prayer on this blessed morning. A quick spell to calm her nerves should work," he thought to himself. Marcus lifted the cross and skillfully wove his calming spell into a benign prayer. "Our Father in heaven, Oratus Domini, grant us clarity of mind, fortuna respiti goberni, and peace of spirit, dormiri senti. May your light on this glorious morning." "What was that?" she called out, caught off guard that the spirit noticed. "I'm not sure what you mean," he replied. "You just tried to cast a spell on me," she cried out. The spirit's eyes welled up with tears. Suddenly, the air between them began to swirl. An ultra-high-frequency array of translucent light began to pulsate around her head. The townspeople shuttered their windows. Marcus had experienced mental incantations before, but nothing of this magnitude. The widow's spirit let out a deafening roar. The gale force of her cry pushed Marcus into a backward slide. He raised his staff overhead and made a deliberate and singular motion, chanting with determined confidence. "Protector of all things, menteni capturi, I call upon your guard. Padre Domini, escudame." The crest stone of his staff began to glow, casting a ward around him to diffuse the sound and shield him from the attack. This wasn't good, he thought to himself. He came here to help the spirit, not to get into a fight. Miss Blackwell raised up her arms, her cloak popping like a flag in the heavy breeze. Her mouth opened wide, releasing an ultrasonic burst in his direction. Before Marcus could formulate a response, he found himself back on the beach. He held firm to his staff and began to recite a prayer of silence to calm the spirit. "Our Lord and Savior, the one true God, hear me now. Cast away these painful cries, misplaced spirit, bestia, polemia, lost in the flames of agony, encanto resoluzzo." But before he could finish, the ground beneath him began to fall away. As gravity pulled him downward, the displaced sand fell onto his ward, which stopped it from crushing him. This gave Marcus a small feeling of victory, but it would be short-lived as the spirit's penetrating attack overwhelmed his magic, causing the shield to collapse and tons of wet sand to crush in against him. The force was unbearable. He ducked his head, forcing his chin against his chest, and began to shape the words to recast the ward. "Mentini capturi, Padre Domini." He struggled to make sounds, as his tongue was busy trying to block the sand from pouring in. He tried to cough, but couldn't. Within seconds, he couldn't breathe. The sand was like concrete. His lungs burned with panic. No, not yet, he thought, going deeper into his subconscious, searching for connection to a higher power. He was aware that great master spellcasters were able to transcend the physical and communicate through time and space. Marcus knew that he was not advanced enough yet to reach into the full depths of his own consciousness, but it was still worth a shot. He concentrated, holding his breath, and then he heard voices, faint but audible. There were many voices, but how? Perhaps they're seeking me out, he imagined. It was enough for him to hold on to as he drifted into unconsciousness. The sensation of wet sand moving around him pulled him back into the present. People were digging. Within a few seconds, he saw light breaking through the sand overhead. A parade of hands suddenly had hold of his staff, and then his arms were busy, lifting him skyward. The moment he was clear, he took in all the air his lungs could muster. He fell to the sand, his cloak and tunic soiled and wet. Just breathe, he told himself. The townsfolk responsible for his rescue had seen everything. They helped him to his feet and guided him to one of the beachfront homes. "You will be warm now. Try to catch your breath." Marcus thought he knew the woman. Her voice felt familiar. "Where is my staff?" He suddenly began to panic, but before his pulse began to rise, a young man presented Marcus with his prized possession. "I was just giving it a clean," the man said. This was very good, but he didn't even bother to say thank you. His mind was on just one thing. "Where did she go?" Marcus asked, looking around, not seeing her. "She dove back into the sea, trying to look for her husband. She does that quite often, every time she comes back empty-handed." A small crowd had assembled. The townspeople, together with Mr. Kent and Franklin, were bustling around him. They murmured and worried. One exorcist didn't seem like enough anymore. They were realizing that they needed to call in more help. Marcus, filthy, soaked, cold, and still wheezing from his encounter, couldn't find it within himself to disagree. He had never experienced a spirit strong enough to undo his protection magic. It took the backup a few days to arrive, giving Marcus enough time to recover. He made his way to the town hall where they'd be meeting up, stopping on occasion to talk to friends he hadn't seen in a long time. His eyes kept watch on the horizon. The storms had been pretty consistent over the past few days, and he didn't trust the brief sunshine the town was enjoying. He stepped into the air-conditioned building and quickly realized he was not the first to arrive. Before him stood a man in a long black trench coat, flipping through a few documents. He had dark hair and green eyes, and his coat was adorned with a symbol that Marcus recognized. 6 blades, all arranged to point downward to the same point. It reminded him of one of those knives that had 4 blades in every direction. This was the unmistakable logo of Razor Blade Security. So, this was the mercenary that the townspeople mentioned calling, he told himself. Marcus offered a small nod and smile, ready to introduce himself, but the man didn't acknowledge him beyond a brief glance and a nod. Marcus decided to sit down instead. He took the opportunity to pray for a little luck and clear-headedness for the task ahead. "Are you Marcus Stone, the first one on the case?" The man finally spoke. His voice was oddly smooth for a man whose appearance suggested a raspier tone. "Yes, I am. I apologize for not introducing myself. You seemed busy." "You've faced this ghost before, then?" "I have." "What happened?" The mercenary dropped the pages. Marcus guessed it was the report he'd been given by the townspeople. "In your own words, of course." Marcus told him, in bits and pieces. His memory of the event was honestly spotty, knocked out of clarity by the force he had been up against. The man, who Marcus realized hadn't yet introduced himself, didn't interrupt a single word of his story. He nodded along and remained silent until the end, and for a few moments afterward. In the silence, the door opened again. The remaining 2 had arrived. First to enter was a man with slate gray hair. His icy blue eyes stood out immediately as he paused to scan the room. His skin was tan and decorated in long pink scars across his hands, arms, and face. He raised his right arm to say hello, exposing a collection of thick metal bracelets which complemented the assortment of heavy chains around his neck. Before he could speak, another voice could be heard. "So, here we are. Now, be nice. Don't do anything until I give the okay." A striking woman appeared through the doorway, eyeing everyone else in the room with eyes that flickered with orange light. Her long black hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a gray shirt, boots, gloves, and a black skirt. "No, not yet. I will let you know." Confused, the man turned to see if anyone else had followed. There was no one. A quiet tension filled the hall as everyone looked around the room, checking the expressions of their peers and confirming their own reactions to this team of saviors. Marcus stepped up and assumed his place next to the threesome. Mr. Kent entered and stood before them. "Thank you, everybody, for coming here. My name is Kent. I am the mayor of this town. I'm pretty sure we're all informed as to why we're here, so let's get down to introducing ourselves." Marcus nodded in agreement. "I'm Marcus," he offered. "Marcus Stone." "Call me Steele." His bracelets jingled as he raised his arm and made a tight fist. The woman responded to the display of machismo with a smirk of disgust. "Shadowheart." She introduced herself without shifting her gaze from the man in the long coat. "And what about you, mercenary?" "Riker," he said, without looking her way, completely disinterested in her staring. He just sat patiently and waited for the meeting to continue. After a moment of collective silence, he gestured to the rest, as if to say, "Gather round." "What?" Steele glared. "I have a plan. Riker took a few moments and explained his plan. The rest of the crew didn't seem too happy about it, with the exception of Marcus.
"You can't just swoop in here and take all the pay for yourself," Steele cried out. "First we got a girl who talks to herself, and now this guy is giving orders."
Marcus leaned in and whispered to Steele. It is very common for hunters to address their magic the same way they address other people. Shadowheart's reputation is solid, and I wouldn't worry too much about Riker. Let's hear what he has to say. Steele paused to consider the information.
"Well, this chump hasn't seen what I am capable of. Let him bring the heat. He is no match for my psychic abilities."
He kept his thoughts to himself, knowing that if he allowed his emotions to build up, he could unleash a devastating spell without thinking things through.
"I'll stick with these guns for now."
Raising both arms and flexing, his muscles trigger a few people in the room to react.
"Ooh."
"We all came out here to deal with this spirit and get paid," Shadowheart chimed in. "I'm getting my name out there, mercenary, and you won't get in the way of that."
"I don't care about the pay," Riker dismissed. "In fact, all that I will ask of these townspeople is enough to pay for a coffin to lay this spirit to rest. Also, I would advise against making rash decisions that would get everybody injured or killed."
Shadowheart gave him an icy glare. "Maybe we should have a discussion. If your plan doesn't work, it would be better to have backup, just in case," Marcus asserted.
Riker replied, "Absolutely. It's always a good idea to have a backup plan."
The tension in the room simmered momentarily. Nobody really expected him to agree so easily. What was the catch?
"How about this?" he suggested. "I propose a bet. If you guys can defeat me, then we'll do the job your way. If I defeat you, we will do the job my way."
Steele cracked his knuckles.
"This is gonna be easy,"
he thought. He was grinning from ear to ear.
"Sounds good to me. I can take you on all by myself."
Shadowheart objected. "I want to get a piece of him as well. Let him know what I'm made of." She cracked her knuckles, then turned and mumbled a reply toward the empty space behind her.
"Soon, Nightshade. Just be ready."
"Hold up there,"
Mr. Kent objected.
"I can't let you guys go around destroying my building, and I wouldn't recommend getting into a fight before taking care of the job. If anyone gets hurt, what am I left with? A ghost that will never go away and keep tormenting our town." "Very well then," said Riker. "What we need are some rules. Rule number 1, no injuring anybody. Rule number 2, no destroying any property. If anybody breaks either of those rules, they will lose." Steele and Shadowheart were quick to agree. Mr. Kent was less willing to agree to these rules. Feeling a bit nervous and awkward about the situation, he turned to Marcus for help. The young priest offered counsel. "I kinda think maybe he's right. We should just let him try it this way, and we'll come up with a backup plan while he's executing his." Somewhat dejected, Mr. Kent nodded and remained silent. "Very well then," said Riker, turning to the other two. "Are either one of you willing to add any rules to our competition and put any limits to what I can do? Or are you good with anything, as long as nobody gets hurt?"
"I don't think we'll have any problem mopping the floor with you, so let's get this thing started."
Riker stepped away from the table and gave a nod of agreement. Marcus remained neutral, standing with Mr. Kent. He didn't want to fight, but figured that seeing what everyone could do might help them work together going forward. Maybe it would work out in everybody's favor. By observing, he was sure he could come up with a solid backup plan. Riker turned and looked at Marcus.
"By the way, you may want to put your magic into its sleep cycle, so it will feel less pain."
This confused everyone. "I think I'm fine," said Marcus. "I can't let my magic sleep. A priest must always be ready to help those in need."
"Interesting," said Riker. "Well, have it your way. Don't say I didn't warn you."
Riker pulled his hands out of his pockets, putting one of them behind his back and the other towards Marcus and Kent. He asked if they wanted to be the referees before putting both hands behind his back. They each looked at each other, hoping they would volunteer.
"Too late,"
Steele shouted as he released his thoughts to send a piece of iron towards Riker, binding him. Shadowheart did the same, casting out a charge of shadows to bind him up.
"Nightshade, the time is now. Bind him."
Riker barely acknowledged them, merely shifting his glance towards them as though he was not surprised at all. Steele and Shadowheart proceeded to clobber him in the face and the chest, and he just stood there, Calmly, bound with the magic of both of his attackers, he defiantly extends a finger and wipes away a bit of blood dripping down his face. This was strange. How had he managed to unbind his arms? After a few seconds of stunned silence, the two stopped the brutal assault. Steel spoke up.
Don't you have magical powers? Looks like you're taking a beating like a regular person.
Steel and Shadowheart's faces showed signs of guilt. They felt they had gone a bit overboard. Steel's attitude quickly changed.
You tricked us, didn't you? You intentionally let yourself get hurt to try to disqualify us.
Anger began to rise in his voice. Riker smiled back and said, "Didn't I tell you? You're going to want to put your magic into a sleep cycle. And don't worry, I won't let this disqualify you. It's too late now. This is already over." And with that, he activated the small bell he had been holding in his hands. The sound rang out with a strange and peculiar pitch. Steel is the first to show signs of the torturous pain. A deep aching pulse consumes his mind. It is unbearable. Marcus suddenly stumbles to maintain his staff. The cross hanging from his neck begins to dim. He can sense the excruciating pain the other two are experiencing. Their bodies shudder in pain. The aching in their heads continues to grow.
That sound,
Steel said.
No, you didn't. Why would you use that sound against us? Don't you know you can damage our magic?
It's not likely, Riker replied. With a few more rings of the bell, the shadows and iron that had been binding him began to melt away.
Nightshade!
Shadowheart fell to her knees and reached toward her fallen shadows as their crumpled forms began to slowly dematerialize.
What have you done?
Her anger was transformed into rage. Looking for retribution, she turned to Steel.
It isn't over,
Steel said as he threw a punch toward him. Riker dodged it and threw a punch back, landing squarely on Steel's face. The two engaged in a short wrestling match that ended with Steel being tied up. Riker then took his coat and threw it over top of Shadowheart, who was crunched up into a ball. It seemed her attempt at transforming herself had been incomplete. Marcus couldn't make out her transformation, as he was only seeing her feet and her back, but he realized that she had the magic to cloak her identity. It wasn't so uncommon for hunters to do this. Some of them preferred having their private life separated from their work life. Riker then looked around. "All right, it looks like I'm the winner, unless any of you have some fight left in you." Steel looked like he wanted to continue on, but it was quite obvious that he had lost. He gritted his teeth in anger, accusing Riker of cheating. Riker turned and said, "I asked you if you wanted to put in any rules, and the two of you refused. If you wanted to have this bell be against the rules, then you should have said something sooner."
I didn't know you had one of those, or that you would be willing to use it.
Steel was sticking to his story. Riker was a cheater.
"That sounds like a problem on your end," Riker said. "Now then, I'll be off to finish the request from the townsfolk. Do take care. Feel free to come up with any backup plan, should I fail," he said, as he untied Steel and took his cloak back from Shadowheart, who had gotten her incantation back and was now in disguise. The two of them were livid over the whole situation. Marcus did his best to calm them down, but had no luck. The two of them were dead set on taking care of business. They felt that the job had been stolen from them, and they wanted to prove that they could do it. With no enthusiasm, Marcus listened to their ideas for a plan, and finally decided to go along with it. He was worried that if he didn't, they would be short-handed, and wouldn't be able to handle the spirit on their own. He didn't think it was the best plan, but he thought they needed to try something. The storm clouds had moved in, and it was beginning to rain. After about 15 minutes of planning and disagreeing, the three of them headed out into the storm. They found the ghost, along with Riker, sitting at the docks. Apparently, Riker was able to talk to the widow without upsetting her. Marcus was not sure how long it was going to last, but perhaps it was a good sign. He wondered if maybe they should change plans, since the spirit was in a decent mood. But the other two weren't listening and went on ahead with their plan.
Shadowheart launched her shadows across the ground.
Nightshade, shadows, come to light. Bring the hold of shadows. Cast upon this angry spite.
Nightshade multiplied. Dozens of tiny shadows snuck up behind the spirit, grabbing her. The spirit was caught off guard and shocked by this. She was dragged a good quarter of a mile and then imprisoned in a cage conjured by steel. Doing his best to keep up, Marcus performed a series of spells to seal her away. Our holy lord, the one true light, hold this troubled soul. Signori, divino, quarete, escude. Bring her home. Free this place. Rejoice, your grace. Domini, portalis, siere absoluto, esceptorum nivolo. His staff began to glow and generated a bright light, enveloping Miss Blackwell as she slowly began to sink, smaller and smaller. Si, dimure, piccolo, piccolo, piccolo. And then, to his complete surprise, the air around her began to vibrate. What was once clear was now blurred. She was growing back to her normal size. "She's breaking free!" Marcus cried out. His instincts told him to back away from the situation. Steel and Shadowheart's reaction was to do the opposite. Together, they strained to cast magic strong enough to imprison her. As Steel attempted to direct his mind to cast a wall against the widow's spirit, he felt his mind invaded by a power he had never felt before. Miss Blackwell was also a mental conjurer with incredible power. The buzzing sensation ran throughout his body, paralyzing him momentarily.
Collect yourself, direct your emotions, and concentrate.
His attempts to recall the wisdom of his mentors was too late coming.
Night is night, and day is day. Shadow Horde, come out to play.
Shadowheart was also behind the punch. Even though the widow spirit's psychic abilities had no effect on her, her own conjuring was no match for what was happening. Suddenly, the ground before them jutted out in sharp granite spikes, pushing them back and forcing a protective circle around the ghost. Around her, an expanding orb of translucent color pulsated and retracted. Was she powering up, or was this some form of barrier? The priest could only wait and see. He managed to pull himself out of the danger zone and ducked away, quickly concealing himself from the spirit, knowing he might be killed instantly if she saw him. Widow Blackwell was enraged now. She spun in all directions to see who it was that was attacking her.
Where are you?
She called out.
How many of you are there?
Steel followed with a bold charge toward the spirit. The ghost answered with a twitch of her lifeless eyes, sending tons of earth in his direction. Steel used the rising mound as a platform, stepping off of it and using its momentum to propel him back down. Enhancing his strength with a mental spell of max impact, he connected his brass knuckles with a solid blow that sent the ghost reeling backwards. In the seconds he gained, his mind raced to conjure a mineral reassignment spell, organizing every trace of iron from the torn earth into a complex mental cage, which he directed downward to surround the angry spirit. Marcus watched on, literally counting his own heartbeats as every second seemed a new eternity. He cringed as Steel struggled again and again to contain the spirit. Her blinding speed and psychic powers continued to evade his attempts. The priest could feel his staff vibrating and warming up, sensing the deep emotional toll the widow ghost was having on Steel. Is this how it's all going to end? He thought to himself. Marcus knew if he could seal the spirit behind a containment barricade, it would at least restrict her ability to fight. Walk not into the valley of the shadow of death. This attempt proved futile. She was too strong. Steel was buried in the ground up to his chest. The ghost was fast and angry. She raised her arms again to move the earth, but before she could, she found herself surrounded by dozens of shadow puppets, all casting sharp shadow projectiles in her direction. The storm of dark knives and spears set the spirit off again. She let out a deafening roar, hurling dirt at the shadows, trying to bury anything that came her way. Suddenly, the widow noticed Shadowheart standing at the rear of her legion of shadows. Her face was dripping with blood. The ghost grinned and hurled a small rock at Shadowheart. The hunter moved to dodge the stone. It missed her heart, but connected, piercing her ribcage just below. She dropped to her knees, and her disguise began to fade away. Seeing this, Marcus knew he had to act. He stopped trying to seal the spirit in hopes that she might calm down now that no one was attacking her. He also feared being discovered. He didn't have the power to defeat her on his own. His mind was racing, searching for a plan to help his temporary comrades. Suddenly, the spirit stopped and took a harder look at Shadowheart.
I know you,
she said.
You used to come here for the summers as a little girl and play on the beach. So, I see you finally grew up and became a hunter like you wanted to.
She stuttered, the thoughts coming to her much more slowly.
Am I the first spirit you tried to hunt?
She asked, with sincere curiosity. Shadowheart didn't say anything. She just clutched the wound in her chest, gasping for air and looking for a way out of the situation. Marcus couldn't see her from his position, so he didn't know what was going on. It looks like maybe somehow he could turn this in his favor. He just needed to figure out how. He wished he knew the relationship of Shadowheart and the spirit a little bit better. They were acquaintances from long ago. Maybe he could use it to calm the spirit. There was no telling how far she had fallen into the dark mirror. Perhaps this was just a momentary pull away from the darkness. But if he could manage to keep her out of the dark mirror, maybe he could restore some sanity to the spirit. Before Marcus could manage to form a solid plan, Riker showed up. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a bandage and placed it on Shadowheart's wound. The instant it made contact with her injury, the bandage began to glow. Its healing magic was powerful and exactly proportional to the severity of the lesion, making it clear to everyone just how serious the injury was. Within seconds, Shadowheart opened her eyes. "Did I get her?" she asked. Just then, the spirit teleported herself to Riker's side, looking at Shadowheart with concern. Shadowheart noticed her voice. It felt familiar and friendly.
"Is she okay?"
asked the spirit.
"I didn't mean to hurt her like that. I didn't realize who she was."
The words trailed off, as the old widow couldn't quite remember the relationship. Riker smiled warmly and said, "She will be okay. The town's going to take good care of her. In the meantime, your ship has come into dock. I suggest you go see your husband."
"You mean you found him? Just like you promised?"
Riker nodded, letting her pass before calling out to stop her.
"Wait a second. You shouldn't go see him, looking like such a mess."
He placed his hand on her back and presented her with a small hand mirror. As the widow spirit looked into the glass, her countenance returned to the youthful beauty of years long past. Her shredded cloak and torn-up dress transformed into clean white linen. She was the image of earthly beauty. The spirit left and made her way back to the docks. Marcus called off his cloaking spell and rushed to dig steel out of his pit before going over to check on Shadowheart. With the help of the priest's magic, the three made their way back to the docks. "Our covenant, like you, O Father, is grace. With it we pray. Padre nostrum, volvenes subido." As they arrived, they noticed a large fishing boat that looked like it had been dredged up from the bottom of the ocean, moored to the end of the dock. Apart from the giant hole in the side of the hull and half a coral reef growing from the bow, the ship seemed like any other. Riker came off of the ship carrying a skeleton. Miss Blackwell stood on the docks crying. Her husband was finally home, even though he was just bones covered in cloth. Suddenly, the storm began to fade away. A breeze blew through the rain, turning it into a light drizzle and setting a fog over the harbor. The boat sounded its foghorn as it drifted slowly away, disappearing into the distant fog. The townspeople were gathered and were waiting for Riker on the beach with a coffin. The mercenary placed the bones inside, and, with the help of a few of the townsfolk, he led the procession to the graveyard behind the old town church. People were running outside. The light shower was a relief from the relentless downpour and squalling wind. As the procession continued to grow, the number of umbrellas increased, creating a somber mood. The funeral continued at the gravesite, which had been prepared by the local gravedigger in anticipation anticipation of Riker's success. The sense of relief among the townspeople was evident on their faces. A heavy burden had finally been lifted from their lives. Those who knew him got up and shared memories of old Mr. Blackwell, and when they were done, his widow gave some final words. Then, Riker tapped on the coffin and gave her a welcoming look. "You look tired. Why don't you come and have a rest?" She gave a nod and climbed inside the coffin, wrapping her arms tightly around her man, and, at last, closed her eyes. The lid was closed. Steele put a lock on it to ensure that it would not open again. After the coffin was lowered into its final resting place, the townspeople filed away, chatting with neighbors and reconnecting with old friends.
"You know something? You are not half bad by me."
Steele's words were a welcome balm to Riker's heart. As he reached out to shake his hand, Riker felt a tugging at his legs. He looked down to see Nightshade had multiplied to show their admiration for his efforts. Marcus and Shadowheart stepped up to give their thanks, and Mr. Kent followed.
You know, I had my doubts, but I must say, you impressed me. All of you.
With a feeling of compassion in his heart for the couple, finally at rest together, Riker picked up a shovel and began to move the earth back where it belonged. Shadowheart, the priest, and Steele all showed their final respects by casting protection over the site.